hat touched Sirius Black's hair, and the hall went quiet in that way. A battlefield goes quiet before the arrows fall. He had imagined this moment 100 times during the journey north, though he had pretended otherwise. He had laughed too loudly in the train compartment, leaned back with his boots almost on the seat, told James Potter that all the old family nonsense meant nothing to him, that he would rather be eaten by the giant squid than bow to tradition, that if the hat tried putting him with the rest of the Black Dynasty, he would bite it. James had laughed. Sirius had liked him for that instantly. James Potter laughed as though the world had been made for him and had not yet disappointed him. He had messy black hair, round glasses, a red and gold confidence already stitched into his skin, and a way of looking at Sirius that said, without caution, without calculation, "You and I are going to be trouble." For one afternoon on the train, Sirius had believed it. He had believed he could step out of the old carriage of his life as easily as he stepped off the Hogwarts Express. He had believed Hogwarts would know him better than his mother did. But the hat was old, older than the Black family tapestries, older than the portraits that whispered blood and duty down the halls of Grimmauld Place, older than the pure blood names his mother spoke as if they were sacred scripture, and the names she spat as if they were filth. The hat settled over his eyes and smelled of dust, sweat, candle wax, and secrets. Its torn brim brushed his cheek like a dry hand. "Ah," said a voice inside his skull. Another Black. Sirius clenched his jaw. Not like them. A tremor of amusement stirred through the hat. "Everyone says that, in one way or another. I mean it. Yes. That is what makes you interesting." The hall waited. Sirius could not see them now, but he felt them. James at Gryffindor, sure of what was about to happen. The Slytherins watching like pale fish beneath green water. The teachers at the high table. His cousin Bellatrix somewhere in the older ranks, sharp-eyed and proud. His brother Regulus standing in the line of unsorted children, trying not to look frightened. Sirius' fingers curled around the edge of the stool. "You want courage," said the hat. "Yes, you have it. Then put me where it belongs." The hat rustled, not aloud, but through the chambers of his thought. Courage, certainly. Recklessness, too. Pride enough to crack stone. A hunger to be seen as yourself, not merely as the son of Orion and Walburga. But courage alone does not belong to one house, young Black. Nor does rebellion. Sirius felt heat rise beneath his collar. "I won't be one of them." "You think houses make men?" asked the hat. "How young you are." He saw, without wanting to, the face of his mother. Walburga Black in the drawing room at Grimmauld Place, chin lifted, wand hand steady, teaching him that every family was a kingdom, and every kingdom required heirs who obeyed. He saw his father's silence beside the fire, the hard black gleam of the family ring, the tapestry where names lived until they disappointed the bloodline and vanished in burn marks. He saw Regulus watching him from staircases, always learning by imitation, always measuring what love cost. The hat saw all of it. "There is ambition here," it whispered. "Not the petty sort. Not merely hunger for power. You want to prove a name can be remade. You want to break a throne and sit in its ashes laughing. You want to win against the house that made you, using the weapons it gave you. No. Yes." Sirius' heart beat like fists against a door. Not Slytherin. But the hat was no servant of children's wishes. It considered what they were, what they might become, what path would test them hardest and reveal them most truly. In that single stretched instant, Sirius felt the future divide like black water around a stone. Gryffindor was flame. He saw himself beside James, laughing, adored, unchained by red banners and common rooms warm as a hearth. He saw escape. Slytherin was shadow. He saw cold eyes, ancestral pride, the old language of blood, the serpent banners under which every Black before him had stood. He saw war. The hat opened its brim. "Slytherin." For one breath, there was no sound at all. Then the Slytherin table erupted. Silver applause rolled like cutlery over marble. Older students stood. Bellatrix clapped with a smile that looked almost like triumph. Lucius Malfoy inclined his head, satisfied, as if some expensive object had been restored to its rightful shelf. Narcissa Black smiled faintly, beautiful and distant as moonlight. At the Gryffindor table, James Potter's grin vanished. Sirius lifted the hat from his head. The candles overhead shimmered, thousands of floating flames blurring above him. Professor McGonagall's expression did not change, but her eyes softened with something like warning. Across the hall, James stared at him as if Sirius had stepped backward through a closing door. For half a second, Sirius wanted to shout that it was a mistake. He wanted to kick the stool over, refuse the table, demand another sorting, tear the ancient hat open seam by seam until it confessed it had betrayed him. But Blacks did not plead in public. That lesson was in his bones before rebellion had a name. So Sirius Black walked to Slytherin. The applause grew louder as he came. It sounded to him like chains being polished. Bellatrix moved aside so that he could sit near her, a royal courtesy from one branch of the family to another. "Well done, cousin," she murmured. Sirius sat down without looking at her. Across the hall, James looked away, and in the line of first years, Regulus Black watched his brother with wide gray eyes, and something in his small face settled into hope. Sirius saw it. That was the first wound Slytherin gave him. Not the applause. Not Bellatrix's approval. Not Lucius Malfoy's measuring gaze, or the satisfied murmur of pure-blood children already counting him as one of their own. It was Regulus. Because for the first time in his life, Sirius realized that rebellion could disappoint the wrong person. The feast appeared moments later in golden abundance. Platters filled themselves with roast meats, potatoes crisp in butter, dark gravy, bright peas, sausages, treacle tart, and pumpkin juice glittering in silver pitchers. Around him, Slytherin students spoke with their mouths half covered and their eyes uncovered. Names moved along the table like chess pieces. Black, Malfoy, Rosier, Avery, Lestrange, Mulciber, Nottot. He knew them all. Not personally, perhaps, but by family dinner, by whispered alliance, by betrothal jokes, by portraits and letters and grudges. He had been born among them as one is born inside a fortress. Bellatrix leaned close. "Your mother will be pleased." "That would be a first," Sirius said. A few students laughed, unsure whether they were permitted. Bellatrix's smile thinned, but she did not strike. "Not here. Not under the eyes of teachers. You should be careful," she said softly. "A sharp tongue is charming only when it serves the right master. I'll keep that in mind when I find one." This time the laughter was smaller. Lucius Malfoy, seated several places away, turned his pale head. He was older, polished, already carrying himself like a man who owned every room he entered. "You have spirit," he said. "That can be valuable, properly directed." Sirius looked at him. "I've never liked being directed." Lucius smiled as though Sirius had performed exactly as expected. "No one does when they are 11. The words were harmless. The tone was not. It suggested time, training, correction. Sirius stabbed a potato with his fork so violently it split. The sorting continued behind him. He heard the names as if from underwater. Pettigrew Gryffindor. Lupin Gryffindor. Evans Gryffindor Docto. Snape Slytherin. At that last name, a thin boy with sallow skin and lank black hair came to the table. Severus Snape moved as if he expected the world to trip him and was ready to hate it first. His robes were too large, his face too guarded, and his eyes, when they flickered towards Sirius, were dark with instant suspicion. Sirius recognized the look. He wore it himself at home. Snape sat a few seats down, near a hard-faced boy named Avery. He did not speak. His gaze kept drifting not to the Slytherins, but across the hall to Lily Evans, the red-haired girl laughing nervously at the Gryffindor table. Sirius noticed. He noticed everything that night because he had nowhere safe to put his eyes. When the feast ended, the Slytherin prefects gathered the first years, and led them down from the warmth of the great hall into the deep stone throat of the castle. They descended stair after stair. The air cooled. Torches burned greenish along damp walls. The sounds of other houses faded above them until the castle seemed to have swallowed Slytherin whole. Their common room lay beneath the lake. A password opened a stretch of bare stone, and the first years stepped into a chamber of green firelight, black leather, carved chairs, old rugs, silver lamps, and tall windows looking into cold, aquatic darkness. Strange shapes moved beyond the glass. The lake pressed against the room like a secret trying to get in. Sirius hated that he found it beautiful. He hated the elegance of it, the ancient stillness, the sense that ambition did not need to shout because it had already inherited the earth beneath everyone else's feet. A prefect gave instructions, dormitories, timetables, rules died by curfew, house pride. No foolishness that embarrassed Slytherin. No public quarrels. No trusting Gryffindors. Several students laughed at that. Sirius did not. The boys' dormitory was round-walled, low-ceilinged, hung in green and silver. Trunks had already arrived. Sirius found his beside a four-poster bed with dark hangings. Regulus was not there. He had been sorted into Slytherin too, as everyone expected, and placed in a different first-year room, since the intake was large enough to split them. Sirius sat on the edge of his bed and looked at his trunk. Avery boasted about his father. Maltseber unpacked sweets. Snape silently arranged worn books on the small shelf beside his bed. The other boys orbited one another cautiously, testing weakness, wealth, lineage. "What did your parents say when you left?" Avery asked Sirius. "They said goodbye," Sirius lied. At Grimmauld Place, his mother had kissed Regulus on both cheeks and told him to remember who he was. She had looked at Sirius for a long moment and said, "Do not shame us." He had bowed theatrically and said, "I'll try to make it memorable." His father had said nothing. That silence followed him now, colder than the lake. Avery smirked. "Mine said Gryffindor is where good blood goes to become embarrassing." "Must run in your family then," Sirius said. Maltseber snorted. Avery's face reddened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're embarrassing me already." There was a pause. Then, from across the dormitory, Severus Snape gave a short, unwilling laugh. Sirius turned. Snape looked down at his book at once, as if he had betrayed himself by making a sound. That was how it began. Not friendship, not trust. A laugh sharp as a match struck in a crypt. That night, when the other boys slept, Sirius lay awake behind green curtains and listened to the lake groan beyond the walls. He thought of James Potter in a tower somewhere, probably already making friends, already laughing with boys who would become brothers by morning. He thought of Gryffindor firelight, red blankets, open windows, the promise of belonging to people who chose him rather than inherited him. Then he thought of Regulus. He had seen his brother's face at the Slytherin table, proud and relieved. Sirius had spent years trying to teach Regulus defiance by example, but Regulus had learned something else, that Sirius went first into danger and made it safe to follow. If Sirius had gone to Gryffindor, perhaps Regulus would have understood rebellion as escape. But Sirius had been sent to Slytherin, and Regulus, loyal as a shadow, had followed him beneath the lake. The thought settled over Sirius like the hat again. "Not like them," he told the darkness. The darkness did not answer. But somewhere beyond the stone and water, the castle shifted around him, ancient and patient, as if it knew that some prisons could become fortresses if the prisoner learned where the walls were weakest. By Christmas, Sirius Black had become a problem no one knew how to solve. His mother wrote every week. At first, the letters came heavy with approval. She praised the Sorting Hat as though it had finally shown wisdom after 1,000 years of questionable judgment. She told him the family was relieved. She told him Bellatrix had spoken well of him, Narcissa had found him amusing, and his father had permitted himself the comment that perhaps Sirius might yet become useful. Useful. Sirius read that word 3 times, then burned the letter in the common room fire. Green flames curled around Walburga Black's handwriting until it blackened and vanished. Across from him, Regulus watched with wounded confusion. "Shall ask if you received it," Regulus said. "I did receive it. You know what I mean. I usually do. It rarely improves things." Regulus frowned into his book. He was smaller than Sirius, neater, less inclined to throw himself against the world just to hear the sound it made. In Slytherin, he bloomed quietly. Professors praised his manners. Older students approved of his obedience. He learned passwords, bloodlines, alliances. He learned which seats belonged to which families, which insults could be spoken aloud, which friendships were advantageous. Sirius watched it happen with a dread he could not name. He had thought the danger was being trapped among people who wanted to turn him into his father. He had not considered that Regulus might want it. Not fully. Not consciously. But the younger boy leaned toward approval as a plant leaned toward light. And in Slytherin, the light was cold and green and came from old names. Sirius fought it the only way he knew how, badly. He mocked Mulciber for hexing Muggle-born students behind the greenhouses. He called Avery a coward in front of 3 fifth years. He told Bellatrix that if purity of blood produced conversation as dull as hers, perhaps Mud had more to recommend it than anyone admitted. He ignored Lucius Malfoy's invitations to sit with the better families, and instead spent long evenings by the lake windows with Severus Snape, mostly because Snape did not ask him to be grateful for Slytherin. Snape was not pleasant. That was one of his better qualities. He could be spiteful, defensive, brilliant, and mean with the precision of a needle. He knew more curses than any first year had a right to know, though he spoke of them academically, as if dark magic were not a moral question, but a technical field regrettably populated by idiots. He loved potions with a devotion Sirius reserved for escape routes. He hated James Potter with an intensity that seemed excessive even before James had done much to earn it. "He is arrogant," Snape said one night, watching Gryffindors through the library shelves. Sirius followed his gaze. James sat with Peter Pettigrew and Remus Lupin, waving a quill around as he told some story that made both boys laugh. James looked happy. Effortlessly, insultingly happy. "He's a Potter," Sirius said. "I think they're born with applause in their ears." Snape's mouth twisted. "You like him. I met him once, derided. You like him." Sirius leaned back in his chair. "You jealous, Nivolus?" The nickname came out before he understood its cruelty. Snape went still. It was not wounded pride that crossed his face. Not exactly. It was recognition. The dull confirmation of something expected. Sirius had seen that expression on house elves kicked by guests at family parties, on distant cousins corrected by elders, on Regulus when Walburga praised one son by cutting the other. Snape closed his book. "Don't call me that," he said. Sirius felt heat rise in his cheeks. Shame, unfamiliar and unwelcome, moved through him like sickness. "I was joking." "You were practicing," Snape said. He left the library. Sirius sat there long after James Potter's laughter faded from the next table. That night, he did something rare. He apologized. He found Snape in the corridor near the dungeons, wand out, speaking softly to a floating candle flame. The flame bent and sharpened into shapes. A snake, a lily, a thin silver knife. Snape extinguished it with a flick when he saw Sirius. "What?" "I shouldn't have said that." "No, I said I shouldn't." And I agreed. Sirius almost smiled. "Are you always this gracious? Are you always this careless?" That struck closer than Sirius liked. He leaned against the wall, folding his arms. In my experience, being careful just gives people more time to decide where to put the knife. Snape studied him. In mine, not being careful tells them where to aim. They stood together in the torchlight, two boys raised in very different houses of humiliation. From the far end of the corridor came laughter. Avery, Mulciber, and two older Slytherins approached, wands loose in their hands. Regulus trailed behind them, not quite part of the group, not quite free of it. Sirius straightened. "Well," Avery said, smiling at Snape. "There you are. We were wondering where the half-blood prince had crawled off to." "Nani? Naya." Snape's face closed. Sirius glanced at him. Half-blood. He had not known. In Slytherin, such things were currency, weapons, invitations to cruelty. Mulciber grinned. "Thought you might show us that little flame trick. Or is it only for impressing Gryffindor girls?" Regulus looked at Sirius, uncertain. Sirius stepped forward. "Walk away." Avery blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Try very hard not to need everything twice." One of the older boys laughed. "Careful, Black. You defending him? I'm insulting you. Do keep up." "Nah. And me, I'm sure. I'm Razor." Avery raised his wand. So did Sirius. The corridor changed at once. There were jokes, and then there were choices. Slytherin boys knew the difference instinctively. Blood mattered. Names mattered. Sirius Black's name mattered more than Avery's, but not enough to shield him forever if he made a habit of standing on the wrong side. Regulus whispered, "Sirius." It was not a warning. It was a plea. Sirius did not look at him. Avery's wand twitched. Sirius moved first. The spell cracked through the corridor like a whip. Avery flew backward into Mulciber, and both boys hit the wet stone floor in a tangle of robes and outrage. One of the older students shouted and sent a jinx that clipped Sirius' shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Snape's wand flashed. The torches guttered blue. A rope of shadows snapped around the older boy's ankles and dragged him down. For 6 glorious seconds, the corridor belonged to chaos. Then Professor Slughorn arrived. He came puffing down the passage in a velvet smoking jacket, his walrus mustache quivering, eyes widening at the sight of 4 Slytherins on the ground, one black boy bleeding from the lip, and Severus Snape standing over them with his wand still smoking. "My dear boys," Slughorn cried. "What at Merlin's name?" "They slipped," Sirius said. Slughorn stared. "All of them?" "Floor's damp, Professor." Snape coughed into his sleeve. It might have been a laugh. Detentions followed, of course. Points were lost with grave reluctance, for Slughorn disliked punishing promising students, especially those attached to influential families. Yet word spread through Slytherin before midnight. Sirius Black had hexed Avery for calling Snape half-blood. By morning, half the house thought him mad. The other half thought him dangerous. Sirius preferred both to useful. But Regulus did not speak to him for 2 days. When he finally did, it was in the common room after dinner. Regulus sat beside him at the lake window, where pale shapes drifted beyond the glass like ghosts. "Why did you do it?" he asked. Sirius watched a Grindylow press one webbed hand to the pane. "Because Avery's an idiot. You know that isn't what I mean." Sirius said nothing. Regulus's voice dropped. "They'll remember." "Good. They'll make you choose." Sirius turned then. His brother's face was pale in the green light. Too young. Too serious. Already trying to survive by predicting the weather of stronger people. "They don't get to make me do anything," Sirius said. Regulus looked at him with sudden frustration. "You always say that as if it makes it true." The words landed harder than any jinx. Sirius had no answer, so he gave the one he always gave. A grin, sharp and careless. "Then I'll say it louder." Regulus looked away. On Christmas morning, 2 parcels arrived from Grimmauld Place. Regulus received sweets, a silver serpent bookmark, and a letter so long it folded 3 times. Sirius received a green silk scarf embroidered with the black crest and a note from his mother. We are told you have been making strange associations. Slytherin will forgive eccentricity in a son of our house, but only if he remembers that mercy toward inferiors is merely vanity wearing perfume. Do not embarrass your brother. Do not forget your blood. Sirius read it once. Then he put on the scarf. Regulus smiled with visible relief. At breakfast, Avery smirked at him from down the table as if something had been settled. Sirius waited until the post owls cleared the hall. Then he stood on the Slytherin bench, drew his wand, transfigured the embroidered black crest into a large silver dog chasing its own tail, and bowed to the entire great hall. Gryffindor exploded with laughter. At their table, James Potter looked up. For the first time since the sorting, he laughed at Sirius Black again. And Sirius, standing above the Slytherins with his mother's gift ruined around his neck, felt the sounds strike him like sunlight in a dungeon. Friendship with James Potter began as a duel and matured into an argument. It happened in February, when snow buried the courtyard and made Hogwarts look innocent. Sirius was crossing from herbology with his hands shoved into his pockets, ignoring Avery's muttered commentary behind him, when a snowball struck the back of his head with the accuracy of a professional assassin. The courtyard went still. Sirius turned slowly. James Potter stood 20 feet away with his wand behind his back and an expression of angelic concern. Remus Lupin was beside him, pale and thin, looking as though he had advised against this. Peter Pettigrew hovered nearby, already laughing because James was laughing. "Terrible weather," James called. Sirius brushed snow from his hair. "Potter, Dora too. Black. You've got 3 seconds to run." James smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Sirius drew his wand. So did James. The duel that followed contained very little formal dueling and a great deal of snow. Sirius sent a charm that turned the ground beneath James' feet slick as glass. James retaliated by enchanting 3 snowballs to pursue Sirius with murderous persistence. Sirius vanished behind a pillar and reappeared on the low wall above the courtyard, launching a hex that made James' glasses fog from the inside. James, half-blind and laughing, sent a gust of wind that knocked Sirius backward into a snowdrift. Gryffindors cheered. Slytherins shouted insults. Ravenclaws gathered at windows. Hufflepuffs sensibly kept their distance. Sirius emerged from the snow with murder in his heart and ice down his collar. James pushed his glasses up. "Still think Slytherins are subtle?" Sirius grinned despite himself. "Still think Gryffindors are clever? Only the good-looking ones." "You're doomed, then." James laughed. It was absurd how easy it was. Sirius hated him for that a little. James had the gift of making the world seem less heavy. Even standing in the middle of a courtyard divided by house colors and inherited suspicion, he behaved as if rules were only suggestions written by people who lacked imagination. Professor McGonagall ended the duel with a voice like a drawn sword. "Potter da. Black. Inside. Now. Nadia. And hour." They received attention together, polishing trophy cases without magic. James arrived late, carrying 2 contraband pastries from dinner and wearing his punishment like a medal. Sirius was already there, sleeves rolled up, glaring at a silver cup awarded to some long-dead boy for services to magical discipline. "Brought you one," James said, offering a pastry. Sirius eyed it. "Poisoned. Only with goodwill. Dangerous substance." James leaned against the trophy case. "You should have been in Gryffindor." There it was. No subtlety. No circling. Just the thing itself, tossed between them like another snowball. Sirius rubbed polish onto the cup until his reflection warped. "Take it up with the hat." "I might. I've been meaning to start a campaign against poor administrative decisions. Make badges." "I will. They'll say free black." Sirius' hand stilled. James seemed to realize too late that the joke had teeth. For a moment, the trophy room was quiet except for the scratch of cloth on silver. Names of old champions gleamed around them. Some were blacks. Some were Potters. Some belonged to families who had dined together and cursed one another in private, united only by the belief that children existed to continue old stories. "I'm not locked up," Sirius said. James did not answer immediately. That was the first time Sirius suspected there might be more to him than noise. "No," James said at last. "But you look like someone keeps handing you keys to doors you don't want to open." Sirius stared at him.